Hi everybody, and welcome back to our Celtic Mindfulness videocast and podcast series. I'm joined today, my name is Frank O'Connor, and I'm joined today by
Carrie Radovich,
my beautiful wife. And today we're going to continue with our series by talking about and giving you some strategies for how to remain calm and at peace within ourselves during times of crisis, which of course we happen to be in right now. And at the very end, stay with us because we'll have some pointers and strategies for you to actually use. So I'd like to begin, Carrie, just by talking about, we're going to go at it in two different ways, folks. I'm a qualified mindfulness meditation instructor, and Carrie is?
I'm a certified executive coach.
So we're going to come at it from two different perspectives. One from the meditative mindfulness personal space, and then Carrie will come at it from
the professional space.
Exactly. Because Carrie works with folks all through the crisis right now. You're still working away with professional people working at home. So maybe, if we talk about that just a little bit first.
Well, and I think you'll see that a lot of the strategies are very similar, sometimes exactly the same, and they're new to people in corporate world. Sometimes the word mindfulness or meditation or some words that we use freely in our personal lives aren't necessarily something that's thrown a lot around in corporate, although it's becoming much, much more common, and lots of companies have gotten on board with that kind of work. So it is not kind of the Wild West as much as it was a few years back.
So from a personal perspective then, what am I dealing with most of the time? And that would be this guy right here. Most of us get in trouble, and I can definitely speak for myself. When this starts swirling or starts going off, or I watch too much TV, for example, or I get caught up in drama regarding coronavirus, regarding the economy, regarding fear, anxiety, particularly about what's coming next, the future, this thing is highly activated and running. And that can cause a complete breakdown of calm and a dis-ease as opposed to a peaceful ease. So I want to really talk about that and tease that out. How can we deal with this and remain at an even keel as we go through this? Would you say it's the same in the corporate situation, Carrie?
Yeah, so the words we use in corporate often to describe that tendency is the inner critic is a word I use a lot with my clients about my inner critic is talking, my inner critic is running the show, this, instead of the voice inside my head. That's one way we talk about it. And the inner critic also leads to this concept that I use a lot in the coaching work I do, which is imposter syndrome. It's when your critic goes wild. It basically tells you, I don't belong here. I'm in over my head. It tells you all kinds of things about your performance. So we talk a lot about that, what's going on inside. And in terms like inner critic and imposter syndrome are very common.
So when you say imposter syndrome, is that the same as not being authentic with yourself?
So it's related. How it is, the actual imposter syndrome means, oh my goodness, I got to this place in my career and I have no idea what I'm doing, and it's just a matter of time until somebody figures out that I do not belong in this job, and then I will get fired. So it's a little bit about I've been playing a role that I actually can no longer sustain. And but it's very real. I have yet to meet a client who hasn't had some version of imposter syndrome. Some of the most impressive C-title people you'd ever want to meet, down to, kind of new managers, it is a very, very common occurrence in the workplace.
I can actually relate to that. As many of you know, I'm been working most of my life as a musician as well as a meditation instructor. And I've often had that feeling, oh my gosh, what if they find out that I'm not as good as they think I am?
Yeah.
And I thought that was unique to me.
No.
And then I talked to other musicians that I greatly admire, and I thought were really incredible. I just had 2 days ago, I spoke to a professional musician about this. Same thing. We all have this fear of we're not as good as other people perceive us to be.
Yeah.
And that definitely can cause chaos in here.
And it's just a matter of time till I get found out, and I'll lose my great job. And even a coach, even though I understand the syndrome, I'm coaching my clients through that syndrome. It sometimes pops up for me. I'll have a bad meeting and I won't feel on, or I won't feel like I was insightful enough, and I'll think, oh my gosh, I'm not really as good as they think I am. They found me out. So it's just human. It's very
Has
human.
that been intensified as a result of people working from home?
I haven't noticed a spike in that syndrome per se, but I think what could potentially cause that to spike up is the idea of we are in uncharted territory, right? So if I'm a leader and I'm used to being around my people and leading them in an office situation, and now I'm trying to figure out how to do this in an environment that I've not experienced before, I can see where it might be cropping up. They're not talking about that right now. I think there's other stuff going on in the corporate space because we're still so new into the COVID crisis, but I would not be surprised if that spikes.
So what else? If you say there are other things going on, what's the predominant issue?
Well, I'm coaching people who are super intelligent, super high potential people, always people who are incredibly good at what they do. And so there is a tendency to be anxious or be worried about, even if it's not an inner critic kind of, they're going to find me out, imposter syndrome thing. It can often just be, what if this project doesn't go well? And what if my team is upset? And what if, I don't make this deadline? So there is a lot of that being in your head and scenario playing that trips people up.
So being in the head,
Correct.
we're back to that. And that's the reason I wanted to tease it out, because if I come back to the personal space, either those folks who are not working, who because their job is gone, so are left sitting at home, or those housewives who are trying to juggle, or what's the word?
Juggle,
Not jungle. Juggle three different things: taking care of kids, cooking, doing a job, doing all of that. Or people who are in retirement or semi-retirement, who are left in this cocoon space. And that same thing begins to happen mentally, whether I think we're working or not. So for me, here's what I notice. If I pay too much attention, particularly to external, circumstances, news in particular.
yeah.
The news is a pretty distressing thing right now, because there's not a lot of good news coming out.
No.
And it's difficult not to kind of absorb all of that in and remain detached. So what can I do? I have some options. Number one, turn it off.
Yeah, for sure.
Obviously, I can turn it off. Do I always do that? No, because I'll get caught up in the drama.
Although I think we do a pretty good job of limiting,
Yeah,
right?
we
So one thing we probably could do better at is doing more reading of news as opposed to watching news. There's a lot of information that says if you watch the news, it's easier to activate you versus consuming the news through written word, whether you're reading it in a newspaper or reading it on your computer. So that's one area I think both of us can improve. But I think the thing we do well is we've decided, okay, here's the news we're going to watch each night.
Right.
We watch NBC. We watch Lester Holt every night on YouTube. It's 20 minutes, and generally that's our main portion of news. Occasionally we'll go off script and watch something else, but
Yeah, we kind of keep it down the
Trying to
middle
limit.
as much as
Yeah.
possible. And then the other thing that's really important, we both have some kind of a mindfulness meditation practice.
Yeah.
And for me personally, I won't speak for Carrie, but for me personally, that's extremely important. I was speaking last night to a group of other meditators, and the one thing we had in common, or speaking from my own space and my own experience, when I look back 10, 20, 30 years, and I can go back much further than that, but if I go back through those 20, 30 years in particular, and I look at, or I remember and experience what it was like not to be meditating on a regular basis, this was so much more activated. It was like a trigger point. It was almost like I spent a lot of my time being hyper vigilant.
Yeah.
Watching what are they going to say? How is that person looking at me? How am I being perceived?
Yeah.
Always waiting for, it was like a war zone.
Yeah.
I felt I was operating all the time from a place of fight or flight.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of us find ourselves in that space. And what the meditation, the mindfulness does is it allows me, at the very least, to come back from that and secondly, to witness what's happening with the thinking mind, as opposed to being completely drowned in it or part of it.
Yeah, yeah. And for me too, in terms of meditation practice, when I get up and do my meditation first thing in the morning, it is a magical reset for the day. There are some days where, you run out of time or you forgot to do that thing before your first appointment, so the thing you cut is your morning meditation. And I know a huge difference. There's a big difference in my day if I do my morning meditation versus not do it. And even if I cut it short, instead of doing 20 minutes, I only do 10. Anything makes a difference to start the day in terms of level setting that thinking mind.
Yeah, 5 minutes can make a difference. Another example too of the benefits of doing that, whether it's 5 minutes, 10 minutes in the morning, 5 minutes, 10 minutes after lunch, or last thing in the evening, I'll talk a little more about that in a moment, is that it allows some space. Where I got caught a lot in my past was reaction. There was no space between somebody saying something, coming in, a chance to perceive it, and what they were saying dangerous? Was it threatening to me, or was it just something innocent? If that filter's not there, and I perceive attack, I'm going right back out in attack mode all the time. And what mindfulness meditation has enabled me to do is put the filter there. Let me give you an example. A couple of days ago, you and I were sitting downstairs, and we have our moments too.
Never.
It's extraordinarily hard to believe. And I said something. I can't even. Again, a lot of these things don't really matter because you go back and you can't remember the circumstances.
The issue, yeah.
But here's what was going on. I was explaining something about that had to do with both of us. You were washing dishes or whatever, and it seemed, my perception was, she's busy, she's not listening to me.
Yes.
Now here's what happened. I realized pretty quickly this was triggering. It was going off for me. And I just removed myself, which is a really good thing to do, and I came upstairs to be quiet. Here's what it allowed me to do. It allowed me to realize that what was being triggered was a 5-year-old little boy who, his mom ran a restaurant, my mom did, and whose dad was an active alcoholic at the time and had no time for children. So it was triggering to the point of nobody's paying attention to this little guy. Now what that allowed me to do was to take a look at that, realize first of all it's not adult Frank that's being triggered. I could calm the little guy down, take some time on my own. I meditated again just to kind of ease down those feelings and those emotions, and then go back to a normal space.
Yeah, and here's the great thing about that. Early in our relationship, I don't think I know we didn't have the skill sets in those situations, and those kinds of things could have turned into an argument, right? Well, why aren't you paying attention? Well, I'm busy doing this and blah, 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 right? So that's how it would have normally unfolded. But we have agreements that we make, and one agreement is if anything gets hot, that we can take a break. And so the fact that he went upstairs made me realize something was up. I let him be where he was, because going in the cave is never a good idea. Just let them be in the cave, and they'll come out of the cave when they're ready. And then we always have a adult conversation. I'm sorry for my part. I'm sorry for my part. We were able to talk through it as adults, not in that moment of heat.
So the space is very important. And again, we're all, self-isolating right now. At least most people are. And that's a challenge. You may find yourself just you and your husband, you and your wife, your wife and a couple of kids in a small container, in a bubble. And that just amplifies. So that ability to stop and have a little piece of space, walk away, regroup, find out what's really going on is a lifesaver. So the mindfulness meditation, even if it's 2 minutes, the ability to have some space, to be able to walk away, regroup, and then come back. So those are a couple of things immediately that come to mind. I want to go back to the workspace now again, Carrie. So that's in the personal space. If we take that same scenario, put it into a workspace,
Yeah.
how is that translating over there?
So it does. I'll often tell my clients if they feel themselves getting activated about something that it's absolutely important to be able to press pause. So I'll say, look, you're in a conversation with somebody, it gets heated, it's going a direction you don't want it to go. You can say, hey, can I press pause on this conversation? And depending on how hot it is, you can either say, I'd like to press pause. Can we start over? Sounds like we're in energetically someplace we don't want to be. Or it could be let's press pause and talk about it after lunch, or let's talk about it tomorrow, or I can feel it's not the right time to have this conversation. So the idea of pressing pause on things that are headed in the wrong direction in order to maintain peace and to maintain relationship. And that's a tool that I always talk to my clients about, how useful, simple, but yet useful.
Very simple. But most effective strategies actually are. You know, the very simple things are the ones that make most difference. I want to come a little bit further now and get a little deeper into strategy, or what are the actual things. And obviously we mentioned a couple right there. One other great thing to do is something we do all the time, which is breathing. But let me dig a little deeper. If I can pay attention to my breath, and you've often heard people talk, well, just take a deep breath. And that in itself, is what it's doing is it's saying, I'm bringing my attention to my breath. So one simple strategy is to do a simple count, 1 to 5, 1 to 10. On each count, I'm going to breathe in and out. And I'm going to maybe pause in between, which is what we normally do in our meditation practice. So breathe in and out to the count of 1, pause. In and out to the count of 2, pause. And so on all the way to 10.
There's a reason your mother told you, count to 10 before you say anything.
Exactly right. So there's a couple of things happen. More than a couple of things are happening. One, I'm focused on the process of the breathing. Am I breathing in and out on each count? Am I taking a pause between each count? That act of attention is bringing attention to the breathing and away from this guy. Our attention cannot be in two places at one time. It's also physiologically slowing everything down. The breathing allows the whole process of our bodies to slow down. One of the things we found out from our meditation practice is, and you can try this at home, if you meditate, particularly if you're going 10, 20 minutes, take your blood pressure prior to meditation, take your blood pressure after meditation, and you will find a fairly significant decrease in blood pressure, because that process allows everything to slow down. So again, just to go through that, simple breathing, bringing attention to breath, doing a slow count from 1 to 10, and as you go, allowing the breath to go slower on each subsequent number. That helps an enormous amount. And the last point about that is you're also bringing the space that we talked about. You're bringing the space in. You're relieving the thinking mind. You're almost saying to the thinking mind, I'm going to let you off the hook for a while. I want you to go do your thing. I'll come back to you later. But during that time, there's peace.
Well, and for anybody who's sitting out there saying, I can't imagine in the middle of a work crisis taking that much time and counting to 10, I'll tell you, I've done before with clients in a session where I can feel a client is really activated and going fast and, blah, 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 blah. I'll say, okay, let's take 2 breaths together, you and me. And I can feel that anxiety in myself thinking, my critic going, okay, this person thinks I'm crazy over there. What is he or she going to say as a result of that? And I have never gotten a response other than, yeah, that feels better. So the ability of, we can pump the brakes by 1 or 2 breaths. If you're in a situation where you don't have the luxury of taking that pause and being away and really putting your oxygen mask on, you can do it in a couple of breaths. And I've even encouraged people to think about, you're around that conference room table and things are getting stressful in a big meeting. You can have a private moment with yourself where you take a couple of breaths. Nobody knows what you're doing. You're just focusing yourself. Your eyes are looking at the table, but you are taking a moment and centering yourself, and it does wonders.
Excellent. I mean, and again, you can see how that works both work-wise and personal space-wise. So let's kind of regroup what we went through today. I will give 3 top things from the corporate world and 3 top things to do from the personal space. So from the personal space, my top 3 would be, number 1, take some space. If something's going on in a relationship situation, take a moment out, whether that's walking out of the room, before responding, just take some space. Even if just close your eyes, don't say anything, count to 10 as your mother told us all as kids, take some space. Secondly, do the meditation, the mindfulness. If the 20 minutes is too much, bring it down to 10, bring it down to 5, bring it down to 2 minutes, bring it down to 1 minute. Any space in the meditative space is better than none. And then finally, at the top 3, bring attention, bring focus to breath. And do the count from 1 to 10, pausing in between each breath. And if you can, slowing the breathing down as you go from 1 to 2 to 3. And see how that plays out for you. It's definitely a very important part of our lives, and I wanted to share that with everybody. So what would you say on the corporate thing?
It's the same 3. It's the same 3. Yeah, they just might look a tiny bit different in the corporate space than they sometimes do in our space, but I'm often on your number 2 of meditating and having some sort of practice. I'm very big on recommending that to clients and try and introduce them, as we mentioned in the last webinar about our podcast, about simple apps. If you don't feel comfortable doing it yourself, there are lots of apps out there now to help you. So my top 3 are your top 3.
Okay, perfect. And what we can do before we finish up is, let's just do a short 5 breath count together to let you experience with us what that looks like, what it sounds like, and what it feels like. So if you would join me just for a moment, we'll just close our eyes, just to be quiet for a moment and bring attention away from the thinking mind and bring it internally. And all we're going to do is breathe from 1 to 5. I'll count us through each one. And on each count, we'll breathe in and out. So breathing in through your nose and out through your mouth, if that is possible. And we want to breathe deeply, but relax without any stress or strain. And we'll pause in between. So let's begin. Breathing in and out to the count of 1. Pausing. Let's breathe in and out to the count of 2. Breathing slowly and deeply, but with no stress. Let's breathe in and out to the count of 3. As we slow our breath down, let's breathe in and out to the count of 4. Let's breathe in and out to the count of 5. And that's it. If the thinking mind, and you can probably feel if you've done that with us, a slowing down of everything. If the thinking mind returns during that period, the best thing to do is acknowledge its presence. Just acknowledge that it's there. Don't offer no resistance whatsoever. Just kind of become a witness to the thinking mind. And if you can, picture it as if it were a cloud in a clear blue sky, just moving across the field of vision and moving away and returning attention back to the breath. Anything you'd add to that, Carrie?
Not a thing.
Okay. So once again, thank you for joining us, everybody, on our, which will be now our weekly Celtic Mindfulness videocast and podcast series. We will do it usually once a week. And we also want to remind everybody that we have Celtic Mindfulness sound healing meditation available online 4 times a week, every Monday and Saturday morning at 10:30 a.m. Pacific time, every Wednesday and Thursday evening at 7 p.m. Pacific time. It's experiential. You don't need any experience whatsoever. It is open to everybody. It's donation based. Anybody is welcome to join us if you want to experience some of what we just did, but adding music, Celtic inspired music and original sounds to that just amplifies the experience greatly. Anything you'd like to add?
Not a thing.
Okay, we're good. So thank you, everybody. Thank you, Carrie, for joining me. And we look forward to seeing everybody next week on our next Celtic Mindfulness videocast and podcast. In the meantime, have a peaceful, ease-filled evening, day, and week. Namaste, everybody.
Namaste.